Welcome again to another episode of Mind in America. We have a special guest here. We have Shanda Kilborn from Exploits, based out of Newfoundland. Not Shanda, but the company. Shanda, VP of Investor Relations, correct?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. With Exploits Discovery. Yep.
And the trading symbol, I love the trading symbol, NFLD.
That's correct on the CSE.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us today. Maybe a little bit about yourself to start.
Sure. I've been in the mining industry for over 15 years, and I'll talk a little bit more, I guess, about how I got my start. But I've mainly worked in investor relations, corporate development, and corporate secretarial roles with junior exploration companies.
Excellent. So yeah, maybe tell us how you got started.
Yeah. So when I was in university, my mother was a corporate securities lawyer based out of Calgary, and she had decided to leave her practice and join a couple clients, which were mining companies. And during conferences, in breaks from university, she would tell me to come, and stand in the booth and hand out fact sheets, and that's where I really had a chance to learn about the industry. So.
Excellent. And now at Exploits, you handle all of the investor relations, bit of corporate development too?
Yeah. With the smaller companies, you tend to wear a few different hats as well, which is great. So yeah.
And we've had Jeff on, the CEO of Exploits. I love talking to him. He's got quite the background and involved with the PDAC as well. So it's nice to meet somebody else on the team.
Well, thanks for having me.
So I know you and I have talked a lot, and I have a great deal of respect for the work you do. But I think today we're going to talk a bit about the bigger picture with the mining industry, correct?
Yes. Yeah. And if, I think you look at the history of mining and the current investment community as well. I mean, right now, obviously, the markets are a challenge. I think the industry as a whole has a lot of challenges. And is mining a dying industry? Some would argue yes. I think there's lots of different aspects to and challenges that the mining industry has, but there's also a lot of great and it's funny. I asked some of our team members at Exploits why they got into mining, and the answer is varied. And I think there's a lack of education on the career opportunities that are in mining, and just a misunderstanding about the industry in general. Of course, I had some geologists say, no, they've always wanted to be a geologist. They had rock collections as kids. But interesting, some of them started in the oil and gas industry, and then realized what opportunity was on the mining side. And there was a common theme with all of our geologists, and there was it's all driven by a passion to discover something, and an industry where your opinion and expertise really matters, right? So, but I think for me, I don't know if I would have ever known about the mining industry as a career hadn't my mom been already in it, and I think that's unfortunate. I'm hoping to take my kids this year to PDAC so they can learn a little bit more, and I think the PDAC does a great job too with bringing student groups around, but we can always do more as a company, as an employee in this industry as well.
Yeah. You and I were talking before about the mining industry. If you knew then what you know now, would you have gone into the industry? And I'll throw mine out there. I wouldn't have. And I wouldn't have for two reasons. I was unaware of the challenges in the mining industry, in the regulatory environment. Number one, we're here to build something, and that's not always a shared vision. And honestly, and you know, can go down a rabbit hole. We don't have to. It is very difficult being a woman in this industry, and I underestimated those two challenges. I don't know, and I don't, you know, we're here. We're going to make something positive of it, and I know you are, but I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, I think my answer would be similar. I don't know if I would have gone into it. That said, I would be okay if my children chose mining. I think there's a lot of change happening now for the future generations, and I'm hopeful that the perception of mining will change. And just even with all the ESG initiatives as well. I mean, there's pros and cons to that and the cost associated with it, but I think as a whole, yeah, I think we're getting there. Obviously there's a lot of work to do, but we're on the right path for sure. Yeah.
So I think we share the same vision. It's a bigger challenge than we anticipated, but here we are. We're trying to build something. How do we get new eyes on the industry, both with talent and investors? Because I think you're sort of going in the same direction. Both are being negatively impacted, and yet we've got so many positives going for us now.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of the reasons why we're here, right? Education. Let's talk about it more.
Yeah.
There was a McKinsey article back in February, and it surveyed students that ages 15 to 30 what industries they would consider. And mining and oil and gas, and this is in Canada where we have all those resources, with the amount of students that would definitely not pick mining and oil and gas as a profession, where they scored the highest. There was relatively little interest in those professions, which is pretty remarkable given we're so resource rich in this country. I think it's unfortunate that's the way it is. But like I said, I think education is going to change that, and whether it's companies, you and I on a micro level, and the government, right?
Yeah, I was shocked. You sent me over some notes from the McKinsey article. A 63% drop in mining engineer enrollment in Australia since 2014. A 39% drop in mining graduates in the US since 2016. That's huge. That's a huge
It is. Yeah.
talent pool that's left.
Well,
And
and I think COVID doesn't help that either, and the switch to remote working, right? It's how do you attract talent to be able to go to these locations that, it's not as cushy as your home office is. I watched Rob McEwen's talk in at the Zurich Precious Metals Summit the other week, and his vision at Los Azules of this sustainable kind of camp is pretty interesting. And he was saying that you have to make a spot where people want to be, and I agree with that. I agree with that. You have to be able to attract talent, and in conditions where people want to work,
yeah,
because there are alternatives out there, and I think we're losing. I think that's not helping the competition as well in our industry, because we do have to go to remote locations.
so tell me a bit more about Rob's talk. I missed it. Because I think one of the challenges that you've identified just now is very real. People don't want to be away from home as long as they need to be in a remote location. So what was the sustainable camp concept?
Yeah, it was. You can see pictures of it in his presentation, but it also had an area for families, so your family could be there as well, and it was pretty luxurious. The concept of it. Now what are the steps to get there? I'm not sure, but the vision, I think, is he has the right idea. Nobody wants to spend weeks on end in a camp in the freezing cold or, with no amenities. So I think it's important to have, to be thinking like this for the ways of the future.
Yeah, yeah. We we need the remote locations, and they offer some challenges, but I know I was working with a copper mine years ago, and they were dealing with daycare on site as an option.
Yeah.
Because you need to attract more women to the industry, and one of the hurdles. So education, big factor. More mining schools. Like, what do you see as some of the solutions in education?
Um, I think I think schools should be doing a better job at presenting it as an industry. I was even speaking with my husband before that, and he went to business school, and he said, it's funny because they didn't do a good job either at talking about the mining industry. He said that was always a small portion. It wasn't, a focus, and why would somebody want to go into geology? But I think schools need to do a better job too of promoting the careers. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I think needs to happen is there needs to be more benefits kept locally.
Yeah.
So for so many decades, and growing up in Ottawa, you see it. The buildings there are beautiful, and they were funded by resource development, whether it was trapping or logging or mining, and those benefits staying locally, I think, help encourage rural communities to enter in a greater way into the mining sector. And that wealth creation, I think, is a huge factor.
Oh, for sure. I mean that's how we're going to be able to diversify into other industries is money from our resources.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mining creates the infrastructure that then tourism can benefit from.
Yeah.
So where do we get the investors? This is now going right into what you do. So I understand you want to keep a few secrets for the benefit of your clients.
It's it's a challenge. It's a challenge. You think about the shows that you attend, and just if you look at the age of investors, I think our younger investors in investing in mining, I don't think so. I think how we attract the newer investors, whether they're younger or just generalists, I think that's by way of new technology at mine sites, and changing the perspective too of mining. We're taking the right steps now, but it's going to take some time, I think. And
Yeah,
if you think about all the money that mining has made, like think of all the schools out there that are named after a mining executive, whether it's Monk, Schulich, Lassonde and McEwen. And I think you even spoke about, the mining from, 95 and 30 years prior to that, and how we are in consecutive growth. And if you looked at those numbers now, just, considering inflation, that we're at half of what the industry
yeah,
used to do. There's still a lot of I guess growth that we have to do, but it's that's and whether that's for permitting issues or more roadblocks that come up, or the challenges that more challenges than in the past. But that's also another, I'm sure, a whole other topic that we could be discussing on another podcast.
oh, I know.
But
I
yeah,
when
but
I drive through Toronto, I go past all the hospitals that have all been built and funded by
yes,
uh, great mining uh, geniuses of Canada.
yeah,
And I think that the industry has undersold its benefits, and helped in some ways to its own demise, by being modest, by just putting its head down and working. And I think we need to sell it a little bit better.
yeah,
I don't think it's a bad thing that you create so much wealth for people, that you enhance community life by building hospitals, or creating 100 jobs in a community of 1,500. I think we're underselling ourselves, and I don't think that's a solution that you and I are going to fix. But I think we can try. right?
Yeah. I mean, every little bit counts, right? That's saying.
Yeah. New investors. I just had some numbers come back on some advertising that we had done on another project, and our numbers were surprisingly lower in the age group than I'd ever seen before. Normally they're over 65. They were starting to come in at 45 to 54 for the first time ever. And I don't know why.
Yeah. I think maybe some of that it's whether it's I think the critical mineral space is helping mining. I think it's
Uh,
bringing more attention to mining and in a better light.
yeah.
Um,
So
so that could be one.
where does everything come for your cell phone?
Yeah, exactly.
Where
Right.
does everything come for your video game, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you get new investors?
I think it's through education and reaching out to different means of of reaching that audience that normally wouldn't think about mining as well. Um, whether that's going to a technology conference, or there's different opportunities out there. And I know some conferences have started to do it. They'll make it just a micro cap conference and it will be a generalist conference. And I do think those are beneficial because you stand out a bit.
If you had to pick in a strategy between reaching out to generalists in a new type of environment where the new investors are, say, high tech, like let's assume that 40-year-olds are interested in investing in high tech, and you try and attract them by going to their market, is that a better use of your capital versus going to a conference where you're competing with all the other mining companies?
That's a good question. And I think, there's pros and cons to both. Yeah, it's sometimes I've found at a generalist conference, you really have to educate. And your job is harder, right? It's more challenging because you have to explain mining.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're going to a mining conference, a resource conference, the attendees are they're educated on the potential investment that opportunities that are there. So I think, you know, it's nice to go to resource conferences because it's generally you can tell your story and it's easy and it's well received. But I think there's more work at generalist conference for sure. But I think we need to do that to start to attract new investors.
Yeah. So a mix of both, because I get your point. If you are at a resource conference, the investor is sold on the industry and probably knowledgeable on the commodity. So now you're able to say, okay, I strike one, strike two, I've got that done. Now I'm just going to sell you on the company. Whereas in the generalist, you're starting at zero. They don't know anything about the industry. But so you're really talking about a mix of marketing where
Yeah.
you're going after the traditional routes, and then you're also trying to, which is tough because so many companies are undercapitalized, right?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it can be a challenge, but sometimes at the generalist conferences, you'd be surprised at, it's sometimes, and it just takes that one investor to convince, or not necessarily convince, but to educate, and really, get behind the story. Exploits was attending a conference not that long ago. There was one attendee that you wouldn't think that they were knowledgeable or had access to capital. But we sat with them and we ran through the story, and then you realize that they're asking intelligent questions. And shortly thereafter, somebody came up to us and said, "Do you know that is the person to talk to at the conference?" I guess you take a chance sometimes when you're investing your time with people and potential investors, but you have to do that.
I think we've always, and so you're sort of alluding to it. The industry has benefited from key, I would call them angel investors, whether it's an Eric Sprott or a Rob McEwen, people that are willing to stand behind the company, put a significant amount of capital up, and help the industry. And I I think you're right. I think we need a few more of those types of people that are coming into the sector that perhaps have been in technology, or, I'm thinking like a Bill Gates is commenting on nuclear. Well, I'm not seeing him invest other than his, but somebody like that, right?
Yeah, it helps, right? If you have a lead name that people follow and follow their investments and invest like them or with them. I think a company always benefits from that. But we also should be thinking about our younger generation. I think our industry lacks in maybe some competition from that, and who is going to be our next Rob McEwen or Shulik, um, and I think if we did some more education on the potential careers and the opportunities that mining has, I think we can get there.
We can get an Elon Musk.
Exactly.
Shoot for the moon,
Yeah.
right?
Maybe we can get a generalist that's crossed over to, or that's been brought in their investments to mining. But
well, we have our work cut out for us. Now we have to educate the next generation, number one, and we have to go and get Elon Musk or somebody like him to get behind the industry. Number two, okay. How do we, one last topic, how do we encourage stronger management? Because I'm hearing this repeatedly, is there's not enough senior management talent pool out there. And I don't know if it's true or not, but I keep hearing it.
I hear it too. I know a handful of companies that are, looking for new CEOs or over the past 12 months. And they're really struggling to find somebody. You look at different press releases, interim CEO, and it's been there for a year. I think the industry is struggling with the, the talent pool, right? And again, it goes back to not enough people are thinking about mining as a career. How do we get there? Is it government promotion too in Canada, ads on TV? Is it companies? Maybe it's unique kind of executive searches. There's a need to educate people that that there's a good opportunity out there.
Yeah, I think we need a couple of very colorful characters. I think we've had some really amazing personalities, and maybe it's COVID, maybe it's accumulation of increasing government regulations and the burden that's placed. But we need we need the next generation of Eric Sprotts and Rob McEwens, and very dynamic people that will reach into the next generation. That's one of my ideas.
I think this generation too doesn't take risks as much, right?
Yeah.
I think everything is safe, comfortable, right down to the careers and just going back to COVID and remote working. Like we've all gotten a little bit used to comfort, I think. But I think that's going to change as well as people do go back into offices or are forced back. I live in Ottawa, and there was a lot of pushback when some of my neighbors had to go back to the office, and and even for myself, I have to go to Toronto more often, and than I used to anyway, and it's and I think it's a good thing. As much as I don't want to leave my home office, when when you're out with it and interacting with other people, I think good things happen. So
I agree, and I even found, my travel schedule was pretty much half my life before COVID, and it's dramatically different now. And I think you're right. I think we've gotten comfortable, and I don't think prosperity grows in that type of an environment. Prosperity grows when there's challenges and difficulties, but I think it's coming. I agree with you 100%. It's coming. And I think I envision a world where mining is going to dominate that new world. is we've got this huge resource available to us in Canada and the US, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially it's so important here. And just looking back on that McKinsey article, it's pretty disappointing that mining and oil and gas
Yeah.
were least
I know.
favored for.
Yeah. I was shocked by the numbers. So here we are, we're in the industry. Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Hopefully running a company.
Excellent. So you are one of the, I'll keep, okay, we need to get you a CEO job. I'm sorry. I shouldn't do that.
Eventually, I'll get there. I have some work to do, like everything, right? But
Yeah, but that's great. I think we need to set those goals for ourselves, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I don't know where I'm going to be in 10 years. I hope I'm still in the industry. I don't think I'm going anywhere, but it's been difficult. It's been difficult at times, but I'm like you. I want my kids to go into this industry.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you'll see mine at PDAC.
I love that. And I'm sorry I didn't get to see you recently, but I probably will see you in January in person.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll
Thank
be
you
in
so much for
Vancouver.
joining us today.
All right. Thanks for having me.
And give my best to Jeff and the team at Exploits. Shanda, it's been wonderful having you here. And anything that I'm missing?
No, I think we've covered it all. Good to be here. Thank you again for having me.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us. It's a fabulous industry. Mind in America. See you next time.